Hello everyone, and welcome to my Days of Our Lives official channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Jada accuses Everett of being Herrick's husband. Maggie congratulated Constantine on the Greek lasagna he'd prepared. She talked about inviting Julie, Doug, Chad, and the kiddies to stay at the manse and confided Constantine for the way he lifted the children's spirits. Constantine gave Maggie an envelope with a Valentine letter outside, and she was touched by the kind words. Constantine expressed that he wanted to let Maggie know how important she meant to him. They bandied Greek traditions analogous to Valentine's Day, and Maggie mentioned Victor and his love of Greek stories. Maggie disregarded about how Victor would compare her to the great beauty Psyche, and Eros to himself, an uncomely beast. Constantine mentioned that Psyche also meant soul in Greek, and he was thankful for getting to know Maggie and her inconceivable soul. Maggie said that Constantine also had a generous, gentle heart, and she asked if he'd any children. Constantine verified that he'd a child named Katerina, whom he called his heart. He wistfully told Maggie that Katerina meant everything to him and that she was beautiful outside and out. He sorely recalled how Katerina had failed in a woeful accident and how he assured himself with recollections of her. Maggie said she knew how the pain of losing a child lessened but always remained. When Maggie asked about Katerina's mama, Constantine explained that his woman was the awful mama whom he adored, but Katerina's death had left an emptiness that the marriage hadn't been suitable to survive. Maggie reminded Constantine that she'd hear if he ever demanded to talk. Constantine gave his thanks and wanted to ask her commodity, "May I kiss you?" Maggie laughed but allowed Constantine a brief kiss. He gently said his good nights and retired. As a tearful Maggie looked at Victor's portrayal, Constantine cried over a picture of Katerina in his room. Abe, Chanel, and Johnny gathered in Paulina's sanitarium room and celebrated the success of her surgery. Kayla explained that the procedure had successfully removed the excrescence and saved Paulina's thyroid, but she stressed that Paulina still could witness difficulties with speaking or other side goods. While Paulina grudgingly acclimated to the erasing board given to her for communication, Kayla said she had heard there was another cause for festivity. She complimented Johnny and Chanel on their recent espousal, and Chanel mentioned that they participated the same Valentine's Day anniversary as Kayla and Steve. Paulina wrote that she was empty, but a departing Kayla reminded her that she'd need to stay a day to eat and that a menu of soft foods would be prepared for her. Chanel asked Paulina if she demanded anything, to which Paulina wrote, "Everything I need is right then." Johnny and Chanel sliced a cutlet that Chanel's workers at the bakery had made for her. Johnny also pulled out his guitar and asked for requests. Chanel said to surprise them. Johnny trilled Chanel with "On Top of the World" and entered applause each round after his performance. Paulina wrote, "Bravo, son-in-law. You are a star." Chanel agreed and gave Johnny a kiss, but the moment was intruded when Paulina suddenly showed signs of torture. Jada heaved when she returned to Rafe and Stephanie's table at the Brady pub and saw Everett. She called him Bobby, and a confused Everett replied, "Who is Bobby, and who are you?" An incredulous Jada asked if he was serious and declared he was Herrick's husband, Bobby Stein. Everett said he'd no way seen her ahead, and Jada angrily replied that he'd broken her heart and her spirit and had left her without looking back. Jada called him a fabricator, but Rafe intruded and told her Everett's name and that he worked at the Spectator. After Jada showed Everett a picture of them as a couple on her phone, Everett suspected that everyone had a doppelganger and that Bobby just looked like him. And perplexed Jada said, "That's you, and you know damn well who you are." She hovered to haul Everett down to the police station and run his prints. Everett suggested to Rafe and Stephanie that Jada was losing it, which maddened Jada further. She continued to lash out at Everett and said she wasn't the bone who was pretending and that he was trying to gaslight her. Jada brazened Everett about how he'd prevaricated to her, cheated on her, and wormed her, egging their divorce. Everett claimed he'd have flashed back if he'd been married. Stephanie flashed back to Everett telling her about his accident and wondered audibly if his amnesia could have been the reason why he didn't flash back Jada. Everett and Stephanie explained the details of the accident and its fate to Jada and Rafe stated that they would look into it. Everett again denied being Bobby and said he'd nothing to hide. Jada said she could tell by looking into Everett's eyes that he knew the verity, and she contended with Stephanie to believe her and to cover herself from Everett. Rafe told Jada they should leave and readdress the issue laterally. Before she left, Jada advised Everett that he'd get what he merited. Everett baffled at the hassle and asked Stephanie how well she knew Jada. Stephanie defended Jada as her friend and as a good person. Everett paraphrased that Jada was wrong and that he'd take every taradiddle sensor and show his motorist's license to prove his identity. He scoffed at the idea that the accident could have made him forget an entire relationship. Stephanie flashed back to Jada telling her about Jada's partner and mused that if Jada was telling the verity, also Stephanie was the other woman. Everett was hurt that Stephanie might have believed this legal insanity. Stephanie explained that Jada had claimed Bobby had bought another woman a ring. Flashing back her discovery of Everett's engagement ring, Stephanie asked Everett if he'd been cheating on Jada with her. Everett reiterated that he wasn't a cheater and asked if they could talk nearly intimately. Stephanie said that wasn't a good idea and left as Everett called after her. Rafe chased and worried Jada into Horton Town Square. He asked her what had happened and expressed that he'd no way seen her like that ahead. Jada blustered about the sharp con man and fabricator that she had been stupid enough to marry. When Jada inferred that Everett had changed his identity, Rafe told her that while he understood she was freaked out, Everett had always struck him as a decent Joe. An angry Jada asked Rafe if he allowed. She was the one lying. Rafe comforted Jada that he didn't believe that, but he reminded her that she had to be 100% sure of her claims before she indicted a man of falsifying his identity. Jada opened up about how seeing Everett had brought back old injuries and resentments. She didn't want Stephanie to witness what Herrick's husband had put her through. She blazoned that she'd go to the police station and leave no gravestone unturned in her disquisition. Rafe realized getting the verity was important to Jada but asked her to hold off until the coming day. He wanted to go home and regain the rest of Valentine's Day with her. Jada agreed after Rafe promised her that they would get to the bottom of the riddle. They hugged. In the sanitarium corridor, a nanny approached Kayla and informed her that Tripp hadn't reported for work. A concerned Kayla called Tripp and left a communication asking him if he'd lost track of time because of Valentine's Day and the geocaching event. She comforted herself everything was likely fine and ended the call by telling Tripp to check in with her. Kayla called Tripp again a many twinkles laterally and said she was starting to get upset. The nanny rushed back to her and declared a law MI on Paulina. Kayla hastened into the room, saw Paulina heaving and moaning, and called for aspirin, nitroglycerin, and a cardiologist. She tried to assure the upset group that help was on the way. Teresa's frustration, Alex's remorse? Days of Our Lives spoilers and updates tease Teresa Donovan, Emily O'Brien, is so frustrated that Alex Kyriakis, Robert Scott Wilson, hasn't proposed she packs up in a hurry. She said up a diamond ring had fallen out of his jacket fund on Valentine's Day and naturally assumed it was for her but didn't give Alex a chance to explain. Days of Our Lives spoilers we all know about the word assume and that not so cute explanation to help one flashback how to spell it but supposedly Teresa skipped that class. She's been anxious to get her hands on the Kyriakis fortune ultimately but since she forged or at least altered a letter to make it read Alex Kyriakis she's anxious. Xander Cook, Paul Telfer, is the true heir at law and Victor Kyriakis, John Aniston, secret son but the longer she's not a Kyriakis, the further chance of losing that plutocrat. Constantine Meliunis, John Capellos, is still a trouble to her secret as long as he remains in Salem as Maggie Kyriakis.